Cedar Falls, Colorado Territory sprawled beneath a canopy of smoke and desperation in the spring of 1882. The mining town that had once buzzed with the promise of silver and new beginnings now lay, suffocated under an invisible enemy that crept through doorways and claimed lives with ruthless efficiency. Smallpox had arrived 3 weeks prior, carried by a traveling merchant who had collapsed in the general store, his face already bearing the telltale pustules of the disease that would soon devastate the community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Anna Mitchell pressed her gloved hands against the rough wooden side of the stagecoach as it lurched to a halt at the edge of what should have been a bustling main street. Instead, she found herself staring at a ghost town wrapped in quarantine cloth and fear. Red fabric hung from doorways like bleeding wounds, marking houses where the disease had taken hold. The driver, a weathered man with tobacco-stained teeth, refused to look at her directly as he hefted her single trunk from the coach. "This is as far as I go, miss," he muttered, already climbing back onto his seat. "Town's under quarantine. Ain't supposed to let nobody in or out, but your letter said you was expected." He paused, finally meeting her eyes with something that might have been pity. "You sure you want to stay? I can take you back to Denver, no charge." Anna straightened her shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of determination settle over her like armor. She had come too far and lost too much to turn back now. The letter in her reticule, creased from countless readings, promised a new life with Robert Caldwell, a prosperous store owner who had advertised for a wife with particular skills in nursing and healing. What the letter hadn't mentioned was the plague that had turned his town into a place where hope went to die. "I'm staying," she said, her voice carrying more conviction than she felt. The driver shrugged and snapped his reins, leaving Anna alone on the dusty road with her trunk and the growing realization that she had stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple frontier marriage. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of hammering and what might have been weeping carried on the thin mountain air. Anna lifted her trunk, grateful for the strength that years of caring for Boston's sick had given her, and began walking toward the heart of Cedar Falls. Each step raised small clouds of dust that seemed to hang in the still air like accusations. She had learned long ago to hide the gift that made her different, the strange warmth that flowed from her hands when she touched the sick and suffering. In Boston, that warmth had been dismissed as coincidence when patients recovered faster. Under her care, the doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital had called her an excellent nurse, nothing more. But Anna knew the truth, had felt the energy that flowed through her fingertips and seen the impossible healings that followed her touch. It was a secret she guarded carefully, sharing it only in her correspondence with Robert Caldwell, who had seemed eager for a wife with healing abilities. The first building Anna encountered was Mrs. Catherine Wells's boarding house, its painted sign hanging askew and several windows boarded shut. She knocked on the front door, noting the red cloth tied to the porch railing, and waited. Footsteps approached slowly, cautiously, before the door opened just wide enough to reveal a woman's haggard face peering through the crack. "We're full up," Mrs. Wells said quickly, already moving to close the door. "And we got sickness here. You best move along." "I'm Anna Mitchell," Anna said, preventing the door from closing with her hand. "I'm here to marry Robert Caldwell. He was expecting me." The woman's expression shifted from wariness to something that might have been recognition, followed quickly by what Anna could only describe as profound sadness. Mrs. Wells opened the door wider, revealing a thin woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back severely and clothes that hung loose on her diminished frame. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, studying Anna's face as if memorizing it. "Child, you don't know, do you?" She stepped back, gesturing for Anna to enter. "Come in quickly," before someone sees you standing there healthy. The boarding house interior was dim and carried the acrid smell of carbolic acid, mixed with something sweeter and more ominous that Anna recognized immediately, a scent of approaching death. Mrs. Wells led her to a small parlor where heavy curtains blocked most of the daylight and gestured for her to sit in a worn velvet chair. "Robert Caldwell is dead," Mrs. Wells said without preamble, her voice carrying the flat tone of someone who had delivered too much bad news in recent weeks. "Took sick 5 days ago. We buried him yesterday morning, along with 6 others." She sank into the chair across from Anna, suddenly looking every one of her years. "The smallpox, it don't care if you're rich or poor, young or old. It just takes what it wants." Anna felt the words hit her like physical blows, each one stripping away another layer of the future she had imagined. The careful plans, the hope for a new beginning, the prospect of using her gifts openly for the first time in her life, all of it crumbled in the space of a single sentence. She gripped the arms of her chair, feeling the familiar warmth beginning to build in her hands as her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "I have nowhere else to go," she said finally, the admission scraping her throat raw. "I sold everything I owned in Boston to come here. The return ticket, my savings, I spent it all preparing for this new life." Mrs. Wells leaned forward, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You said you had healing abilities in your letters to Robert. That true, or just wishful thinking?" Anna hesitated, the old fear of revelation warring with her desperate circumstances. In Boston, she had learned to downplay her gift, to attribute any unusual recoveries to conventional medicine and good nursing. But here, in this plague-stricken town where death stalked the streets, perhaps honesty was not just brave, but necessary. "It's true," she said quietly. "I can't explain how it works, but when I touch someone who's sick, sometimes there's a warmth that passes between us. And sometimes they get better when they shouldn't have." She met Mrs. Wells's eyes, bracing herself for the skepticism or fear that usually followed such admissions. Instead, the older woman's expression grew thoughtful, almost calculating. "Can you prove it? What do you mean?" Mrs. Wells stood slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. "I mean, I got 3 people upstairs who are dying. The doctor, what's left of him, says there ain't nothing more to be done. If you really can heal like you claim, now would be the time to show it." Anna felt her heart rate accelerate. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In Boston, her healing had always been subtle, gentle nudges toward recovery that could be dismissed as natural healing. She had never attempted to treat anything as serious as smallpox, had never tested the true limits of her ability. The prospect both terrified and thrilled her. "What doctor?" she asked, stalling for time while she gathered her courage. "Dr. Thomas Hayes," Mrs. Wells replied, and something in her tone suggested there was more to that story. "He came to town about 2 months ago, set up a clinic in the old assay office. Been working day and night since the outbreak started, but he ain't exactly—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "He ain't the most welcoming sort. War did things to him, you understand. Left marks that run deeper than the ones you can see." Anna nodded, recognizing the careful way Mrs. Wells spoke about the doctor. She had known men like that in Boston, veterans of the great conflict who carried their wounds both visible and hidden. "Is he treating the patients upstairs?" "He was," Mrs. Wells said. "Until yesterday, when he said there wasn't no point in prolonging their suffering. Now he just comes by to check if they're still breathing and to help prepare the bodies when they ain't." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Truth is, I think he's about given up on everything, not just the folks upstairs." The weight of the situation settled over Anna like a heavy blanket. She was stranded in a dying town with no money, no prospects, and no way home. The man she had come to marry was dead, and the only medical authority seemed to have abandoned hope entirely. But perhaps that was exactly why she was here. Perhaps her strange gift, the warmth that had frightened and confused her for so many years, was meant for this moment. "Show me to them," she said, standing and smoothing her traveling dress with hands that trembled only slightly. Mrs. Wells studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me, child. And God help us all if you really can do what you say you can." They climbed a narrow staircase that creaked with each step, the smell of sickness growing stronger as they ascended. The hallway at the top was lined with doors, most of them closed, but Anna could hear the labored breathing and occasional moans of the afflicted. Mrs. Wells stopped at the first door and placed her hand on the brass knob. "This is Lucy," she said softly. "She's maybe 8 years old, been with us since her parents died of the pox 2 weeks ago. Sweet little thing, but she took sick 3 days ago." Mrs. Wells's voice caught slightly. "Dr. Hayes says she won't last another day." Anna nodded, steeling herself for what she was about to attempt. She had never tried to heal anything this serious, had never pushed her gift to its limits. But standing in this hallway, breathing air thick with desperation and approaching death, she felt something shift inside her. The warmth in her hands was no longer just a curious phenomenon to be hidden and feared. It was a weapon against the darkness that had consumed Cedar Falls. "Mrs. Wells," she said, turning to face the older woman, "if this works, if I can truly help these people, word will spread. People will want explanations I can't give them. They'll want to know how and why, and I don't have those answers." "Honey," Mrs. Wells replied, her hand still resting on the door handle, "right now nobody in this town is asking why the sun rises or why the rain falls. They're just grateful. When it happens, you help these folks get better, and I don't think anybody's going to question the how of it too closely." Anna took a deep breath, feeling the familiar surge of energy building in her chest and flowing down through her arms to pool in her palms. For the first time in her life, she was about to use her gift openly, without pretense or fear of discovery. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if this moment had been waiting for her all along. Mrs. Wells opened the door, and Anna stepped into the room where Lucy lay motionless beneath heavy quilts, her small face already showing the distinctive rash that marked the disease's progression. The child's breathing was shallow and labored, and Anna could see the fever burning in her flushed cheeks even from across the room. "Lucy, honey," Mrs. Wells whispered, approaching the bed slowly, "there's someone here to see you. This is Miss Anna, and she's going to try to help you feel better." The little girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with fever. Anna moved to the bedside, her heart breaking at the sight of this small life hanging in the balance. She had treated children in Boston, had seen the particular cruelty of disease when it struck the young and innocent. But something about Lucy, perhaps her fragile beauty or the trust that shone through her fever-bright eyes, struck Anna with unusual force. "Hello, Lucy," Anna said softly, seating herself carefully on the edge of the narrow bed. "I'm going to touch your forehead, all right? It might feel warm." The child managed a small nod, and Anna gently placed her palm against Lucy's burning skin. Immediately, she felt the familiar surge of energy, but stronger than she had ever experienced before. The warmth flowed from her hand like water from a spring, and she could actually feel it spreading through the child's small body, seeking out the infection and beginning the slow work of healing. Lucy's eyes widened, and for a moment, Anna feared she had frightened her. But then the little girl smiled, the first genuine expression of peace Anna had seen since arriving in Cedar Falls. "That feels nice," Lucy whispered, her voice still weak but already carrying more strength than it had moments before. Anna maintained the contact, pouring every ounce of healing energy she possessed into the small form beneath her hands. She could feel the disease retreating, the fever beginning to break, the inflammation in Lucy's throat and airways starting to subside. It was the most intense healing she had ever attempted, and the effort left her dizzy and drained. When she finally lifted her hand, Lucy's breathing had eased noticeably, and the angry red rash on her face had begun to fade. Mrs. Wells gasped, dropping into a chair beside the bed as if her legs would no longer support her. "Lord Almighty," she breathed. "I've never seen anything like it." Anna swayed slightly, the exertion having taken more out of her than she had expected. But the satisfaction of seeing Lucy's improvement made the fatigue worthwhile. She had done it, had used her gift openly and successfully to fight back against the disease that had terrorized Cedar Falls. "There are 2 more?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she had the strength for additional healing so soon. Mrs. Wells nodded, still staring at Lucy in amazement. "Can you manage it? You look about ready to fall over." Anna considered the question honestly. The healing had drained her considerably, and she could feel the familiar emptiness that followed such exertions. But she also felt something else, a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for far too long. For years, she had hidden her gift, using it sparingly and always in secret. Now faced with genuine need and desperate circumstances, she finally understood what she was meant to do with the strange power that had marked her as different. "I'll manage," she said, pushing herself to her feet with an effort. "Show me to the next room." The second patient was a middle-aged man named Henry who worked in the silver mine when he wasn't fighting for his life against the smallpox. His case was more advanced than Lucy's had been, and the healing required even more of Anna's diminishing strength. By the time she finished with him, she was trembling with exhaustion and had to grip the bedpost to remain upright. The third patient, an elderly woman named Sarah who helped with laundry for the boarding house, proved to be the most challenging yet. The disease had progressed far into her system, and Anna had to dig deep into reserves of energy she hadn't known she possessed. When she finally completed the healing, she collapsed into the chair beside the bed, her vision swimming with dark spots and her entire body shaking with fatigue. But all 3 patients were breathing easier, their fevers broken, their rashes fading. In the span of 2 hours, Anna had accomplished what the town's trained physician had declared impossible. She had turned back death itself and given hope to a community that had all but surrendered to despair. Mrs. Wells helped her downstairs to the parlor, where Anna accepted a cup of strong tea with hands that still trembled from the effort. The older woman sat across from her, studying her face with an expression of wonder and growing respect. "I've lived in this territory for 23 years, Mrs. Wells said finally. Seen droughts that killed cattle, winters that froze men solid, and mine accidents that buried good folk alive. But I ain't never seen anything like what you just did upstairs." Anna sipped her tea, feeling some of her strength beginning to return. "I've never attempted anything quite so extensive before," she admitted. "In Boston, I used my gift sparingly, carefully. I was always afraid of drawing too much attention." "Well, honey, you're going to draw attention here whether you want it or not. Word's going to spread about what happened today, and folks are going to come looking for healing." Mrs. Wells leaned forward, her expression serious. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Anna considered the question while she finished her tea. She could attempt to leave town, try to find passage back to Denver, and somehow make her way back to Boston. But she had no money for travel, and more importantly, she had just discovered the true purpose for her unusual gift. Cedar Falls needed her in a way that Boston never had. Here, her ability wasn't just helpful, it was literally a matter of life and death. "I'm going to stay," she said, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke the words. "Robert Caldwell may be dead, but his town is still alive. And as long as people are dying from this disease, I have work to do." Mrs. Wells smiled, the first genuine expression of joy Anna had seen since arriving in Cedar Falls. "Then we'd better figure out where you're going to live and how you're going to eat, because healing folks don't pay much in currency, even when it works miracles." As they began discussing practical arrangements, Anna felt a sense of rightness settling over her that had been absent from her life for years. She had come to Cedar Falls expecting to become a store owner's wife, to live a comfortable but unremarkable life hiding her true nature. Instead, she had found her calling in the most unlikely of places, a plague-stricken mining town where hope had nearly died. But even as she planned her new life as Cedar Falls healer, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that her greatest challenges lay ahead. Mrs. Wells had mentioned Dr. Thomas Hayes, the war-scarred physician who had given up on his patients. Sooner or later, she would have to face him, and she suspected that meeting would determine not just her future in Cedar Falls, but the fate of everyone the disease had yet to claim. Word traveled fast in a town as small as Cedar Falls, especially when that word carried the impossible promise of salvation. By dawn the next morning, Anna found herself awakened by the sound of hushed voices gathering outside Mrs. Wells's boarding house. She dressed quickly and descended to find the older woman already preparing for what appeared to be a siege of desperate hope. They started arriving before sunrise, Mrs. Wells explained, peering through the lace curtains at the growing crowd. Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile, old Pete who works the stamp mill, the Kowalski family from the east side of town. Word about Lucy and the others has spread like wildfire. Anna joined her at the window, her stomach tightening at the sight of perhaps 24 people clustered in the street. Some carried children in their arms, others supported elderly relatives who could barely stand. All of them wore the same expression of fragile hope mixed with the bone-deep exhaustion that came from watching loved ones slip away. "I don't know if I can help them all," Anna said quietly, remembering how drained she had been after healing just 3 patients. "Yesterday nearly killed me." Mrs. Wells turned from the window, her expression grave but determined. "Maybe not all at once. But child, you gave this town something it ain't had in weeks. Hope. That counts for something, even if you can't save every soul out there." A gentle knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Wells opened it to reveal a young man in his 20s, his hat clutched nervously in his hands and his clothes dusty from what appeared to be a hard ride. "Begging your pardon, ma'am," he said, glancing between Mrs. Wells and Anna. "I'm Billy Patterson from the Triple Creek Ranch, about 10 miles north. My boss, Mr. Garrett, sent me to fetch the healer woman. His little girl took sick 2 days ago, and she's real bad off." Anna felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. These people saw her as their salvation, their answer to the plague that had devastated their community. But she was just one woman with a gift she barely understood, facing a disease that had claimed hundreds of lives across the territory. "How did you hear about me so quickly?" she asked. Billy shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "Doc Hayes rode out to the ranch yesterday evening. Told Mr. Garrett about what happened here. Said there might be someone who could help little Emma." Anna's breath caught. Dr. Thomas Hayes, the man Mrs. Wells had described as giving up on his patients, had ridden out specifically to tell others about her healing abilities. The revelation was both surprising and troubling. Why would a physician who had abandoned hope suddenly become a messenger of potential salvation? "What exactly did Dr. Hayes tell your employer?" Anna asked carefully. Billy's face brightened slightly. "Said there was a woman in town who had some kind of gift for healing, that she'd pulled 3 folks back from death's door when conventional medicine couldn't help them. Mr. Garrett didn't waste no time sending me to fetch you." Mrs. Wells glanced at Anna, raising an eyebrow. "Seems the good doctor ain't as given up as I thought. Or maybe he's just curious to see if what happened yesterday was real." Anna considered the situation. If Dr. Hayes was spreading word about her abilities, it could mean several things. Perhaps he genuinely believed she could help where he had failed. Or perhaps he was skeptical and wanted to see her fail publicly, proving that unconventional healing was nothing more than wishful thinking. Either way, she couldn't ignore a child in need, especially when that child's family had specifically requested her help. "I'll come," she decided. "But I'll need transportation back to town, and someone should stay with the patients here too." "Make sure they continue recovering." Billy nodded eagerly. "Got a wagon outside, ma'am. And Doc Hayes said he'd check on the folks here while you're gone." The ride to the Triple Creek Ranch took them through countryside that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. Rolling hills dotted with pine trees stretched toward distant mountains, and wildflowers bloomed in meadows that showed no sign of the disease ravaging the nearby settlements. But Anna found it difficult to appreciate the scenery while her mind raced with questions about Dr. Hayes and his motivations. Billy proved to be a talkative companion, eager to share what he knew about the ranch and its occupants. Mr. Garrett was a widower who had built his spread from nothing, working 18-hour days to carve a life from the harsh territory. His daughter Emma was his pride and joy, a spirited 6-year-old who could ride better than most grown men and had wrapped every ranch hand around her small finger. "She took sick real sudden-like," Billy explained as they bounced along the rough road. "One day she was helping me feed the chickens. Next day she couldn't hardly lift her head from the pillow." Mr. Garrett's been beside himself with worry. Anna nodded, understanding the particular agony of watching the child suffer. Children were often the most responsive to her healing touch, their young bodies more resilient and willing to accept the energy she could provide. But they were also the most heartbreaking patients, their innocence making their suffering seem especially cruel. The Triple Creek Ranch was larger and more prosperous than Anna had expected. Well-maintained buildings surrounded a central courtyard, and she could see cattle grazing in distant pastures. It was the kind of spread that represented success and stability in the frontier territories, built by men who refused to let the harsh conditions defeat their dreams. Mr. Garrett met them at the main house, and Anna immediately understood why his daughter was so beloved. Despite the worry etched in his weathered features, his first concern was for Anna's comfort after the long ride. He was a big man with calloused hands and sun-weathered skin, but his voice was gentle when he spoke about Emma. "She's been asking for her mama," he said quietly as he led Anna toward the house. "Been 3 years since consumption took my wife, but Emma still calls for her when she's fevered." His voice caught slightly. "I'd give anything to bring Sarah back, just for Emma's sake." Anna followed him through a well-appointed front room and up a staircase lined with family photographs. The house felt lived in and loved, a sharp contrast to the sterile boarding house rooms where she had performed her previous healings. This was a home where a family had built their dreams, and now those dreams hung in the balance with a little girl's life. Emma's room was painted a cheerful yellow with white curtains that fluttered in the breeze from an open window. But the child herself was a heartbreaking sight, small and still beneath a quilt that seemed to swallow her tiny frame. Her breathing was labored, and the characteristic rash of smallpox had begun to appear on her face and hands. "Emma, sweetheart," Mr. Garrett said softly, approaching the bed. "There's a lady here to see you. Her name is Miss Anna, and she's going to try to help you feel better." The little girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused with fever, but still holding a spark of the spirit Billy had described. She managed a weak smile when she saw Anna, and something in that trusting expression made Anna's chest tighten with determination. "Hello, Emma," Anna said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "I'm going to put my hands on your forehead, and it might feel warm. Is that all right?" Emma nodded weakly, then whispered, "Are you an angel? Papa said maybe an angel would come to help me." Anna felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not an angel, sweetheart. I'm just someone who wants to help you get better so you can go back to riding horses and feeding chickens." Emma's smile widened slightly. "Billy told you about the chickens?" "He did. He said you're the best chicken feeder in the whole territory." Anna placed her hands gently on Emma's forehead, feeling the familiar surge of warmth beginning to build in her palms. But this time, something was different. The energy flowed more easily, more naturally, as if her body was learning to channel the gift more efficiently. She could feel Emma's small body responding immediately, the fever beginning to break and the infection starting to retreat. Mr. Garrett gasped audibly as color returned to his daughter's cheeks and her breathing eased. Anna maintained the contact for several minutes, pouring healing energy into the child's system and feeling the disease's grip loosening with each passing moment. When she finally lifted her hands, Emma was sitting up in bed, looking around the room with clear, bright eyes. "Papa," she exclaimed, her voice strong and clear. "I feel better." Miss Anna made the hurt go away. Mr. Garrett dropped to his knees beside the bed, gathering his daughter into his arms with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Thank God," he whispered. "Thank God and thank you, Miss Anna." Anna watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and growing unease. The healing had been easier this time, requiring less of her strength and producing more dramatic results. Either her ability was growing stronger with use, or there was something about Emma that made her particularly receptive to healing energy. Either way, the implications were troubling. If word spread about such a dramatic recovery, she would soon find herself overwhelmed with requests for help. "Mr. Garrett," she said carefully, "I need to ask you to be discreet about what happened here today. If too many people learn about Emma's recovery too quickly, I'll have more patients than I can possibly help." The rancher looked up from his daughter, his expression serious. "Of course, Miss Anna, we'll keep this quiet as long as you need us to." He paused, studying her face. "But I can't let what you've done go unrewarded. Name your price money. Land, livestock, whatever you need, it's yours." Anna shook her head. "I don't want payment, Mr. Garrett. Just promise me you'll take care of Emma and help me get back to town safely." As they prepared for the return journey, Billy pulled Anna aside with a troubled expression. "Miss Anna, there's something you should know about Doc Hayes. He's been asking a lot of questions about you since yesterday, where you came from, what kind of training you had, how long you've been able to heal folks." Anna felt a chill of apprehension. What kind of questions? Billy glanced around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. The kind that make it sound like he don't believe what he saw. Like maybe he thinks you're some kind of fraud or confidence woman taking advantage of desperate folks. The revelation struck Anna like a physical blow. She had hoped that Dr. Hayes might prove to be an ally, another medical professional who could help her navigate the challenges of treating an entire community. Instead, it seemed he viewed her as a threat to be exposed rather than a resource to be embraced. "Has he said anything specific about wanting to test me or prove I'm a fake?" Anna asked. Billy nodded grimly. "Yesterday evening, after he told Mr. Garrett about you, he said something about how extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Sade planned to observe your methods closely to determine if there was any scientific basis for your apparent success." Anna climbed into the wagon for the return trip with her mind racing. Dr. Hayes wasn't just skeptical, he was actively investigating her. As a trained physician, he would have the knowledge and authority to challenge her methods publicly. If he decided she was a fraud and spread that conclusion throughout the community, it could destroy any hope she had of helping the people of Cedar Falls. The journey back to town seemed shorter than the trip out, perhaps because Anna spent most of it lost in worried thought. By the time they reached the boarding house, the crowd of hopeful patients had grown even larger. Mrs. Wells met them at the door with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Thank heavens you're back," she said quickly. "We've got problems. Dr. Hayes came by about an hour ago, asking all sorts of questions about your background and methods. He examined Lucy, Henry, and Sarah real thorough-like, taking notes and measurements. When people asked him what he thought, he just said he was conducting a scientific evaluation." Anna's heart sank. The confrontation she had been dreading was apparently inevitable. Dr. Hayes was positioning himself as the voice of medical authority, ready to either validate or condemn her methods based on his own scientific standards. The problem was that her gift defied scientific explanation, operating according to principles that conventional medicine couldn't understand or accept. "Where is he now?" Anna asked. Mrs. Wells pointed toward the center of town. "Set up some kind of examination area in front of his clinic. Says he wants to observe your methods firsthand and document your results." Half the town's gathered to watch. Anna looked out at the crowd of desperate people, still waiting for her help. Their faces showed the same mixture of hope and desperation she had seen that morning. But now there was something else: anticipation, as if they were expecting some kind of showdown between the traditional doctor and the mysterious healer. "I can't avoid him forever," Anna said finally. "And these people need help whether Dr. Hayes approves of my methods or not." Mrs. Wells nodded but looked worried. "Just be careful, child. Hayes may be scarred and bitter, but he's still got the authority of medical training behind him. If he decides you're dangerous or fraudulent, he could turn this whole town against you." Anna squared her shoulders, drawing on the same determination that had carried her through years of hiding her gift and months of preparation for her journey to Cedar Falls. She had come too far and helped too many people to be intimidated by one skeptical doctor, no matter how educated or experienced he might be. "Then I guess it's time Dr. Hayes and I had a proper introduction," she said. "And time for this town to decide whether they want to cling to conventional medicine that's failed them, or take a chance on something that might actually save their lives." As she walked toward the center of town with Mrs. Wells beside her, and the crowd of patients following behind, Anna felt the weight of the moment settling over her. This wasn't just about proving her abilities to one skeptical doctor. It was about establishing her place in Cedar Falls and determining whether she would be allowed to continue the work she was beginning to understand as her true calling. Confrontation ahead would test not just her healing abilities, but her courage, her conviction, and her willingness to stand up for what she knew to be true in the face of professional opposition. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice wondered whether Dr. Thomas Hayes might prove to be more than just an obstacle to overcome, whether he might be the key to understanding not just her gift, but her place in this community that so desperately needed hope. The crowd that had gathered in front of Dr. Hayes's clinic was unlike anything Cedar Falls had seen since before the outbreak began. People who had barely spoken to each other in weeks now stood shoulder to shoulder, united by desperate hope and morbid curiosity. Anna could see faces she recognized from the boarding house, mixed with others she had never encountered: miners with coal-blackened hands, shopkeepers in their finest clothes, and mothers clutching feverish children to their chests. At the center of it all stood Dr. Thomas Hayes, and Anna's first sight of him nearly stopped her in her tracks. The left side of his face bore the unmistakable scars of fire or explosion, the skin drawn tight and discolored in a way that spoke of terrible pain endured and survived. But it was his eyes that truly arrested her attention, dark and intelligent, carrying a weight of knowledge and loss that she recognized immediately. This was a man who had seen the absolute worst that humanity could inflict upon itself, and had emerged changed but not broken. He had arranged a simple wooden table in front of his clinic, its surface covered with medical instruments that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. A leather-bound notebook lay open beside them, already filled with precise handwriting that Anna could not read from her distance. Everything about his preparation spoke of methodical scientific inquiry, the kind of approach that reduced human suffering to measurable data and observable phenomena. "Miss Mitchell, I presume," Dr. Hayes said as Anna approached. His voice carried the refined accent of education, probably Eastern medical schools, but there was something else beneath it, a raspiness that suggested vocal cords damaged by the same trauma that had scarred his face. "I've been looking forward to making your acquaintance." Anna stopped a few feet from his table, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes watching their interaction. "Dr. Hayes, I understand you've been asking." Questions about my work? Indeed I have. He gestured toward the notebook. I've documented the recovery rates of your previous patients, cross-referenced their symptoms with established medical literature, and consulted with colleagues in Denver regarding similar cases. The results are, I must admit, quite remarkable. Something in his tone made Anna wary. This didn't sound like a man preparing to denounce her as a fraud. If anything, he seemed genuinely intrigued by what he had observed. And what conclusions have you drawn? Dr. Hayes picked up a stethoscope from his table, turning it over in his hands with the careful attention of a craftsman examining a tool. I've concluded that conventional medicine, at least as I've been practicing it, has failed this community completely. 17 people have died under my care since the outbreak began. 17 souls I could not save despite years of training and experience. Anna felt a stab of sympathy for the pain evident in his voice. She had seen that same sense of professional failure in the doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital, when patients died despite their best efforts. You can't save everyone, Dr. Hayes. Sometimes the disease is simply too strong. Perhaps, he said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. But you've saved 3 people who I had declared beyond help. That suggests either miraculous intervention or knowledge I do not possess. He paused, studying her face carefully. I'm hoping you might enlighten me as to which it is. Anna glanced around at the watching crowd, many of whom were leaning forward to catch every word of their conversation. This was not the public confrontation she had expected. Dr. Hayes wasn't challenging her abilities, he was asking her to explain them. The distinction was crucial, but it also presented a different kind of problem. How could she describe a gift she didn't fully understand to a man trained in scientific method and rational analysis? My methods aren't traditional, she said carefully. They don't follow the principles you learned in medical school. I'm beginning to suspect that my medical school education may have been somewhat limited in scope. Dr. Hayes replied with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Would you be willing to demonstrate your techniques? I have several patients who might benefit from your intervention. Anna felt the crowd's anticipation intensify. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the test that would determine whether she was a genuine healer or an elaborate fraud. But looking at Dr. Hayes, she sensed that his interest was more complex than simple skepticism. There was something almost desperate in his manner, as if her abilities represented not just a medical curiosity, but a potential salvation for his own sense of professional failure. I'd be willing to try, she said finally. But I need you to understand that what I do isn't always successful. And even when it works, I can't always explain why. Dr. Hayes nodded as if he had expected such a qualification. Medicine is full of phenomena we observe, but cannot fully explain. The important thing is whether the treatment helps the patient, not whether we understand the underlying mechanism. He led her toward his clinic, a converted building that had once served as an assay office for the mining operations. The interior was sparse but clean, with several beds arranged along the walls and a collection of medical supplies that spoke of careful preparation and limited resources. The air carried the familiar sense of carbolic acid and laudanum, but underneath those clinical odors, Anna detected something else, the lingering presence of fear and desperation. 3 patients occupied the beds, all in various stages of smallpox progression. Dr. Hayes moved between them with practiced efficiency, checking pulses and observing symptoms while maintaining a careful commentary for Anna's benefit. His manner with the patients was gentle despite his professional detachment, and Anna found herself revising her initial impression of him as coldly analytical. Mrs. Patterson has been ill for 4 days, he explained, indicating a middle-aged woman whose labored breathing filled the small space. The fever broke yesterday, but returned this morning with increased intensity. Mr. Chun here was brought in 2 days ago from the mining camp. His case has progressed more rapidly than typical, possibly due to malnutrition. and young David has been fighting the disease for nearly a week. I've done everything conventional medicine suggests, but their conditions continue to deteriorate. Anna approached Mrs. Patterson's bed, studying the woman's flushed face and hearing the distress in her breathing. She could feel the familiar warmth beginning to build in her hands, responding to the proximity of suffering in the way it always had. But she was also acutely aware of Dr. Hayes watching her every movement, his intelligent eyes missing nothing. "What exactly are you observing when I work?" she asked, wanting to understand his scientific perspective before she began. Dr. Hayes consulted his notebook. Pulse rate, respiratory patterns, skin temperature and coloration, pupil response, and any changes in the patient's level of consciousness. I'm also noting the duration and apparent intensity of your contact with each patient. Anna nodded, appreciating his methodical approach, even as she wondered what he would make of the energy transfer that conventional instruments couldn't measure. She placed her hands gently on Mrs. Patterson's forehead, immediately feeling the surge of healing warmth that had become so familiar over the past few days. "Her pulse is stabilizing," Dr. Hayes murmured, his stethoscope pressed to the woman's wrist. "Respiratory rate dropping from 32 to 28 breaths per minute." "Fascinating." Anna maintained the contact, feeling the woman's fever breaking and the inflammation in her lungs beginning to subside. Mrs. Patterson's eyes fluttered open, clearer than they had been in days, and she managed a weak smile when she saw Anna's face above her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still hoarse but noticeably stronger. Dr. Hayes made rapid notes in his book, his scarred features intense with concentration. "The improvement is measurable and immediate," he said, more to himself than to Anna, "but the mechanism remains unclear. May I examine your hands?" Anna hesitated, then extended her palms toward him. Dr. Hayes studied them carefully, even going so far as to check her pulse and observe the temperature of her skin. His touch was clinical but not ungentle, and Anna found herself noticing details about him that had escaped her attention during their initial confrontation. The careful precision of his movements, the way he unconsciously favored his left side, the thin gold band on his ring finger that suggested a personal loss to match his professional struggles. "Your hands show no unusual warming or other physical changes," he noted. "Yet the patient's improvement is undeniable. It suggests that whatever mechanism you're employing operates below the threshold of conventional observation." Anna moved to the second bed, where Mr. Chun lay in the grip of fever-induced delirium. The healing required more effort, the disease having progressed further in his weakened system, but she could feel the familiar process taking hold. Dr. Hayes continued his measurements and observations, occasionally asking quiet questions about her techniques or the sensations she experienced during the healing process. By the time she finished with young David, Anna was beginning to feel the familiar drain that came with extended use of her gift. But all three patients showed marked improvement, their breathing easier and their fevers broken. Dr. Hayes had filled several pages with notes and measurements, his expression growing more thoughtful with each observation. "I must admit," he said finally, closing his notebook and studying Anna with undisguised fascination, "that what I've witnessed today challenges several fundamental assumptions about the nature of medical treatment. Your methods produce measurable results despite employing no recognizable therapeutic techniques." Anna sank into a chair, grateful for the chance to rest. "Does that mean you believe what you've seen?" Dr. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between his recovered patients and the woman who had accomplished what his years of training could not. "I believe in results, Miss Mitchell, and the results speak for themselves. These people were dying under conventional treatment, and they're alive and improving under yours. The mechanism may be unclear, but the outcome is undeniable. So what happens now?" Anna asked, uncertain whether his acceptance was a blessing or a complication. Dr. Hayes looked toward the clinic's front window, where the crowd still waited for news of the demonstration. Now we have a decision to make. This community needs medical care, but it also needs hope. You've provided both in ways I cannot match. The question is whether we can find a way to work together rather than at cross purposes. Anna felt a flutter of something unexpected, not just relief at his acceptance, but genuine curiosity about the possibility of collaboration. Dr. Hayes represented everything she had always feared about conventional medicine: scientific skepticism, professional authority, institutional credibility. But he also possessed something she lacked: formal training, diagnostic skills, and the ability to treat conditions that might be beyond her gift's reach. "What kind of collaboration did you have in mind?" she asked. Before Dr. Hayes could answer, the clinic door burst open and Mrs. Wells rushed inside, her face pale with alarm. "Anna, thank God you're here. We've got trouble coming." "Big trouble." Anna rose quickly, her fatigue forgotten in the face of whatever crisis had brought Mrs. Wells running. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Wells glanced nervously at Dr. Hayes, then back to Anna. "Writers coming in from the territorial capital. Official-looking types with badges and paperwork. Word is they're here to investigate reports of unlicensed medical practice and possible fraud. Someone's been spreading stories about miracle cures and supernatural healing." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. Just when she had found acceptance from the local medical authority and begun to establish her place in the community, outside forces were arriving to challenge her right to practice. The irony was bitter. She had finally stopped running from her gift, only to discover that her gift might force her to run again. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "How long before they arrive?" "Maybe an hour," Mrs. Wells replied. "They stopped at the Hendricks place to water their horses, but they'll be here soon enough." Anna looked between Dr. Hayes and Mrs. Wells, her mind racing through limited options. She could try to leave town before the officials arrived, but that would mean abandoning the patients who still needed her help. She could stay and try to explain her methods, but territorial authorities were unlikely to be as open-minded as Dr. Hayes had proven to be. Or she could fight, using whatever support she had gained in the community to challenge their authority, to interfere with her work. "Miss Mitchell," Dr. Hayes said quietly, his scarred face serious, "if you're willing to trust me, I believe I may have a solution to this problem. But it will require a level of cooperation between us that goes far beyond what we've discussed." Anna met his eyes, seeing something there that she hadn't noticed before, not just professional respect, but personal conviction. This man had found something in her work that spoke to his own sense of purpose, and he was prepared to put his reputation on the line to protect it. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Dr. Hayes moved with the swift efficiency of a man accustomed to making crucial decisions under pressure. He strode to a wooden cabinet at the back of his clinic and withdrew an official-looking document, its wax seal still intact. Anna watched as he broke the seal with careful precision, scanning the contents with growing satisfaction. "This is my commission as Territorial Health Officer," he explained, holding up the paper for Anna to see. "It grants me authority to appoint medical assistants during health emergencies and to implement unconventional treatments when conventional methods prove inadequate." He looked directly at Anna, his scarred face grave but hopeful. "If you're willing to accept formal appointment as my medical assistant, these territorial investigators will have no grounds to challenge your right to practice." Anna stared at the document, her mind reeling with the implications. Accepting such a position would legitimize her work, but also place her under Dr. Hayes' authority. After years of hiding her gift and practicing in secret, the prospect of official recognition was both thrilling and terrifying. "What would that mean exactly?" she asked. "What would be expected of me as your medical assistant?" Dr. Hayes carefully folded the commission and placed it in his coat pocket. "It would mean we work together as a team. I handle diagnosis, conventional treatments, and all official documentation. You provide the specialized care that my training cannot match. Together, we might actually save this community." Mrs. Wells stepped forward, her expression urgent. "That's all well and good, but those riders will be here soon. If you're going to do this thing, you'd better do it fast." Dr. Hayes nodded and moved to his desk, withdrawing a blank form from a drawer. "The appointment can be made immediately under emergency provisions. Miss Mitchell, I need to know, are you willing to work under my supervision? To follow my medical protocols while applying your own methods?" Anna considered the question carefully. Throughout her adult life, she had been forced to subordinate her gift to the expectations and limitations of others. In Boston, she had hidden her abilities to avoid challenging the medical establishment. Here in Cedar Falls, she had finally begun to use her gift openly, but now she was being asked to place it under the control of conventional medicine once again. But looking at Dr. Hayes, she saw something different from the dismissive physicians she had encountered before. His offer of partnership carried genuine respect for her abilities, and his willingness to risk his own reputation suggested a level of commitment that went beyond mere professional courtesy. "I accept," she said firmly, "but I need your word that you won't try to limit or control how I use my gift. I know what I'm capable of, and I need the freedom to work according to my own understanding." Dr. Hayes paused in his writing, meeting her eyes with an expression of complete seriousness. "You have my word, Miss Mitchell. I've seen enough of your work to know that whatever you do, it works. I won't interfere with methods that produce results." He completed the form with rapid strokes of his pen, then held it out for Anna's signature. As she signed her name, she felt a profound shift in her circumstances. For the first time in her life, her healing gift had official recognition and protection. The sensation was both liberating and sobering. "There," Dr. Hayes said, blotting the ink carefully. "As of this moment, you are officially appointed as my medical assistant, with full authority to practice under my supervision during the current health emergency." He looked up as the sound of approaching horses reached them through the clinic window. "And it appears our timing is impeccable." 3 men dismounted in front of the clinic, their travel-stained clothes and official bearing marking them clearly as territorial authorities. The leader was a tall, thin man with a meticulously groomed beard and cold eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. His companions were younger and more roughly dressed, but they carried themselves with the swagger of men accustomed to wielding power in frontier communities. "Dr. Hayes," the leader called out as he approached the clinic door. "I'm Inspector Morrison from the Territorial Medical Board. We need to speak with you about reports of irregular medical practices in your district." Dr. Hayes opened the door with calm professionalism, his manner betraying none of the urgency Anna had witnessed moments before. "Inspector Morrison, welcome to Cedar Falls. I'm afraid we're in the midst of a rather severe smallpox outbreak, but I'm happy to discuss any concerns you might have." Inspector Morrison stepped into the clinic, his gaze immediately moving to Anna with undisguised suspicion. "We've received reports of unlicensed individuals practicing medicine in this area. Specifically, a woman claiming to have supernatural healing abilities who has been treating patients without proper training or authorization." "You must be referring to my medical assistant, Miss Mitchell," Dr. Hayes replied smoothly. "She's been invaluable during this crisis, working under my direct supervision to provide specialized care to outbreak victims." Anna watched Inspector Morrison's expression shift from confident accusation to uncertain confusion. "Medical assistant? We were told she was practicing independently, claiming to cure smallpox through some kind of miraculous intervention." Dr. Hayes gestured toward the 3 patients who had been recovering under Anna's care. "As you can see, Miss Mitchell's techniques, while unconventional, produce measurable results. Under territorial health regulations, I have full authority to employ whatever methods prove effective during a declared health emergency." Inspector Morrison approached Mrs. Patterson's bed, studying her improved condition with obvious puzzlement. This woman was reportedly dying yesterday, according to our sources. Yet she appears to be well on her way to recovery. Miss Mitchell has developed innovative techniques for treating advanced smallpox cases, Dr. Hayes explained. Her success rate has been remarkable, particularly with patients who don't respond to conventional treatment. One of the younger officials stepped forward, his expression skeptical. What kind of innovative techniques? We've heard talk of laying on of hands and miraculous healing. That sounds more like superstition than medicine. Anna felt a moment of panic, but Dr. Hayes responded without hesitation. Miss Mitchell employs a combination of advanced nursing techniques, specialized massage therapy, and what might be termed therapeutic touch. The exact mechanisms are still being studied, but the results speak for themselves. Inspector Morrison pulled out a leather portfolio and began making notes. I'll need to see documentation of her training and certification. The Territorial Medical Board requires all practitioners to meet established standards, regardless of their specific methods. Dr. Hayes moved to his desk and withdrew the appointment form they had just completed. Miss Mitchell is working under emergency appointment as my medical assistant. Her specialized skills are being employed under my direct supervision and responsibility. All territorial requirements are being met. Anna watched the interchange with growing admiration for Dr. Hayes' ability to navigate official bureaucracy while protecting her unconventional methods. He was using the language of medical authority to shield her gift from those who would suppress it, creating a framework that allowed her to continue her work without having to explain or justify abilities that defied conventional understanding. Inspector Morrison studied the appointment form carefully, checking its format against some kind of reference document from his portfolio. This appears to be in order, he admitted reluctantly, but we'll need to observe Miss Mitchell's methods firsthand to ensure they meet professional standards. Of course, Dr. Hayes replied. We have several patients arriving this afternoon who would benefit from her specialized care. You're welcome to observe and document whatever you feel necessary. As if summoned by his words, the clinic door opened to admit Billy Patterson, who was supporting an elderly man Anna didn't recognize. Doc Hayes, Billy called out urgently. This is Mr. Jameson from the Territorial Road Crew. He took sick this morning and can barely stand. Anna moved toward the new patient instinctively, but caught herself when she noticed Inspector Morrison watching her every movement. The delicate balance Dr. Hayes had created could be destroyed if she appeared to act independently or employ methods that seemed too far outside conventional medicine. Dr. Hayes stepped forward to examine the patient, his hands moving expertly as he checked pulse, temperature, and other vital signs. Advanced smallpox presentation, he announced for the benefit of the watching officials. Miss Mitchell, please prepare your specialized treatment protocol. Anna understood immediately what he was asking her to do. She needed to employ her gift in a way that appeared consistent with conventional medical practice, at least to observers who weren't familiar with the true nature of her abilities. Moving to a wash basin, she cleaned her hands thoroughly and then approached the patient with the deliberate manner of a trained professional. Mr. Jameson, she said softly, I'm going to use a specialized technique that may help reduce your fever and ease your discomfort. You might feel warmth from my hands, but that's a normal part of the treatment. Inspector Morrison moved closer, his attention focused on every detail of Anna's actions. She placed her hands on the patient's forehead, allowing her gift to flow while maintaining the appearance of conventional medical procedure. The familiar warmth built in her palms, but she was careful to modulate the energy transfer to avoid any dramatic changes that might alarm the watching officials. Pulse rate stabilizing, Dr. Hayes announced, his stethoscope pressed to the patient's wrist. Temperature appears to be dropping. Miss Mitchell's technique seems to be effective. Anna maintained the contact for several minutes, providing enough healing energy to begin the patient's recovery while being careful not to produce results so dramatic that they would invite uncomfortable questions. When she finally stepped back, Mr. Jameson was breathing more easily and his fever had visibly broken. Inspector Morrison made detailed notes while observing the patient's improved condition. "This therapeutic touch technique," he said slowly. "Where did Miss Mitchell receive training in its application?" Dr. Hayes responded without missing a beat. "Miss Mitchell studied with pioneering practitioners in Boston, who have been developing these methods for treating infectious diseases. The techniques are still considered experimental, but our results here suggest they have significant potential." Anna marveled at Dr. Hayes' ability to weave truth and misdirection together so seamlessly. Her time in Boston had indeed involved working with sick patients, and her methods were certainly experimental in the sense that she was still learning to understand and control them. He was protecting her by placing her gift within a context that officials could accept without fully comprehending. The inspection continued for another hour, with Inspector Morrison and his companions observing Anna's treatment of 2 additional patients, while Dr. Hayes provided running commentary that framed her healing abilities in terms of advanced conventional medical techniques. By the time the officials prepared to leave, they seemed satisfied that proper protocols were being followed, even if they didn't fully understand the methods being employed. "Your documentation appears to be in order," Inspector Morrison admitted as he prepared to remount his horse. "However, the Territorial Medical Board will want a full report on these experimental techniques. We may send observers to study Miss Mitchell's methods more extensively." Dr. Hayes nodded professionally. "We'll be happy to cooperate with any official studies. The advancement of medical knowledge benefits everyone, especially during health emergencies like our current outbreak." As the officials rode away toward their next destination, Anna felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the promise of future scrutiny meant that her work would continue to be watched and evaluated by those who might not prove as understanding as Dr. Hayes. "Thank you," she said quietly, watching the dust cloud raised by the departing horses. "I know you risked your own reputation to protect me." Dr. Hayes removed his coat and hung it carefully on a peg beside his desk. "Miss Mitchell, in the past 3 days you've saved more lives than I managed to save in 3 weeks of conventional treatment. Any risk to my reputation is more than justified by the results you've achieved." Anna studied his scarred profile as he organized his medical notes from the day's treatments. "Why are you really helping me? It's more than just medical curiosity, isn't it?" Dr. Hayes paused in his work, his hands stilling on the papers. For a long moment, the only sound in the clinic was the steady breathing of their recovering patients. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of memory and regret that Anna had heard echoes of before. "During the war, I served as a surgeon with the Union Army," he said slowly. "I saw more death and suffering than any man should have to witness. I watched soldiers die from wounds I couldn't heal, from diseases I couldn't cure, from infections that conventional medicine was powerless to stop." He touched the scars on his face unconsciously. "I received these marks trying to save a field hospital from Confederate artillery. Half the men inside died anyway, despite everything I did to try to save them." Anna felt her throat tighten with sympathy for the pain evident in his voice. "You can't blame yourself for the limitations of medicine." Dr. Hayes turned to face her, his damaged features stark in the afternoon light filtering through the clinic windows. "Perhaps not. But I can recognize a chance for redemption when I see one. Your gift represents everything I wished I could have done for those dying soldiers, for all the patients I've lost over the years. Working with you isn't just about saving lives in Cedar Falls. It's about finally being part of healing instead of just documenting failure." The honesty of his admission struck Anna with unexpected force. She had been so focused on her own fears and struggles that she hadn't fully considered what her abilities might mean to someone who had dedicated his life to healing but been forced to watch so many die despite his efforts. Dr. Hayes wasn't just offering her protection and legitimacy. He was asking for partnership in something that could restore meaning to his own medical practice. "Then we'll work together," she said firmly. "Not just to satisfy territorial inspectors or protect my right to practice, but because you're right. Together, we might actually save this community." Dr. Hayes smiled, and for the first time since she had met him, the expression reached his eyes. "In that case, Miss Mitchell, I believe we have work to do. Mrs. Wells mentioned at least a dozen more patients waiting at the boarding house, and I suspect tomorrow will bring even more." As they began preparing for the evening's rounds, Anna felt a sense of partnership and purpose that had been missing from her life for years. Her gift finally had not just acceptance, but active support from someone who understood both its potential and its challenges. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new obstacles and complications, but for the first time since arriving in Cedar Falls, she felt truly confident that she could face whatever came next. The afternoon sun slanted through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the floor, where two very different healing traditions had found common ground in the simple desire to save lives. And in that golden light, Anna began to understand that her journey to Cedar Falls had brought her not just to a place that needed her gift, but to a partnership that might allow her to finally become the healer she was meant to be. 3 weeks had passed since the territorial inspectors departed Cedar Falls, and the transformation in the town was nothing short of miraculous. The red quarantine claws that had marked doorways like wounds had been taken down one by one, replaced by the everyday bustle of a community returning to life. The sound of children's laughter echoed through streets that had been silent with grief, and the general store had reopened its doors to customers who no longer feared contagion with every breath. Anna stood at the window of what had become their shared clinic, watching families reunite with relatives who had been isolated during the worst days of the outbreak. The building itself had expanded since those early days, with Dr. Hayes acquiring the adjacent storefront to accommodate the steady stream of patients who came not just from Cedar Falls, but from mining camps and ranches scattered across the territory. Word of their partnership had spread far beyond the original community, carried by grateful families and traveling merchants who had witnessed recoveries that defied conventional medical understanding. The morning brought its usual array of challenges. Anna moved between examination rooms with the confident efficiency that had developed through weeks of intensive practice, her gift now operating with a precision and control that would have seemed impossible during those first desperate days. She had learned to modulate her healing energy based on the severity of each case, conserving her strength for the most critical patients while providing gentle support for those in the early stages of recovery. Dr. Hayes emerged from his office carrying a leather satchel that Anna recognized as his traveling medical kit. His scarred features had lost some of the haunted quality that had marked them during their first meeting, replaced by the focused intensity of a man who had rediscovered his sense of purpose. The partnership between them had evolved into something that transcended their initial arrangement, becoming a seamless collaboration that maximized both conventional medical knowledge and Anna's extraordinary abilities. "The Henderson Ranch sent another messenger," he said, checking the contents of his bag with practiced efficiency. "Their youngest boy developed symptoms yesterday, and they're requesting immediate assistance. It's a 2-hour ride, but if we leave now we can be back before evening rounds." Anna nodded, already moving to gather her own supplies. The routine of traveling to outlying areas had become a regular part of their practice, with Dr. Hayes providing transportation and conventional medical backup while Anna's gift served as their primary weapon against the disease. The arrangement had proven remarkably effective, allowing them to reach patients before the infection could progress to critical stages. Have you given any more thought to the proposal from the Territorial Medical Board? Anna asked as they prepared to depart. The letter had arrived the previous week, formally requesting that they document their treatment methods for publication in medical journals throughout the Western Territories. The recognition represented everything Anna had once dreamed of, but it also carried complications that made her deeply uneasy. Dr. Hayes paused in his preparations, his expression growing thoughtful. The opportunity to share our methods with other physicians could save countless lives across the frontier. But I understand your concerns about increased scrutiny and the potential for misunderstanding. Anna had spent sleepless nights considering the implications of such exposure. Publication would legitimize their work and potentially help other communities facing similar health crises. But it would also invite investigation from medical authorities who might not prove as accepting as Dr. Hayes, and could draw attention from those who would seek to exploit or control her abilities for their own purposes. I keep thinking about what you said that first day, she said, securing her medical supplies in a canvas bag. About extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary proof. The more attention we attract, the more proof people will demand, and I'm not sure I can provide the kind of scientific explanations they'll expect. Dr. Hayes finished loading his satchel and turned to face her directly. Anna, in the past month we've treated over 60 patients with a success rate that exceeds anything documented in conventional medical literature. The proof is in the lives we've saved, not in our ability to explain the mechanism behind your gift. Anna felt warmth spread through her chest at his use of her first name, a familiarity that had developed gradually as their professional partnership deepened into something more personal. The formal distance of their early interactions had given way to easy conversation and shared decision-making that felt more like true collaboration than the hierarchical arrangement originally envisioned by the territorial authorities. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in Boston, she said, following him toward the door. Whether I would have eventually found the courage to use my gift openly, or if I would have spent my entire life hiding what I could do. Dr. Hayes stopped with his hand on the door handle, turning to study her face with the intensity that had become familiar over weeks of working closely together. You would have found your way eventually. People with gifts like yours aren't meant to remain hidden forever. The need to help others would have driven you to take risks, just as it brought you to Cedar Falls. Anna felt something shift in her chest at his words, a recognition of understanding that went beyond their professional relationship. Dr. Hayes had seen something in her that she was only beginning to recognize in herself, not just healing ability, but the determination to use that ability regardless of personal cost. It was a quality he shared, she realized, evidenced by his willingness to risk his reputation and career to support her unconventional methods. The ride to the Henderson Ranch took them through countryside that showed the first signs of approaching autumn. Golden leaves dotted the aspen groves, and the morning air carried a crispness that spoke of changing seasons. Anna found herself studying Dr. Hayes's profile as he guided their wagon along the rough mountain roads, noting details that had become precious to her through weeks of shared work and conversation. Thomas, she said, using his first name with the same casual intimacy he had shown her. What will you do when the outbreak is finally over? When there are no more emergency cases requiring our specialized partnership? Dr. Hayes considered the question while navigating around a fallen tree that blocked part of the roadway. I suppose that depends on whether you plan to stay in Cedar Falls permanently, or if you see this as a temporary arrangement until you can establish yourself elsewhere. Anna felt her heart rate accelerate at the implications behind his question. Over the weeks of working together, she had begun to envision a future that extended far beyond the current health crisis. The partnership they had built felt too valuable to abandon, and her growing feelings for Thomas made the prospect of separation increasingly unthinkable. I hadn't really considered leaving, she said carefully. Cedar Falls has become home in ways I never expected. And our work together has given me a sense of purpose I've never had before." Thomas smiled, and Anna caught a glimpse of the man he might have been before the war scarred both his face and his spirit. "Then perhaps we should begin planning for that future." The Territorial Medical Board isn't the only organization that's taken notice of our success. I've received inquiries from 3 other frontier communities requesting assistance with their own health challenges. Anna felt excitement building in her chest. The prospect of expanding their partnership beyond Cedar Falls, of bringing their combined abilities to other communities in need, represented a future she had never dared to imagine. "You're suggesting we could work together permanently, travel throughout the territory providing specialized medical care?" "I'm suggesting," Thomas said, his voice carrying a note of carefully controlled emotion, "that we could build something together that neither of us could accomplish alone. A medical practice that combines the best of conventional training with abilities that transcend conventional limitations." Anna studied his profile, searching for signs of the deeper feelings she hoped might mirror her own. The professional respect between them had evolved into something more complex over the weeks of intensive collaboration, but she had been afraid to assume that his interest extended beyond their medical partnership. "Thomas," she said softly, "when you talk about building something together, are you speaking purely about our professional relationship?" Thomas pulled the wagon to a halt beside a small stream that crossed the road, ostensibly to water the horses, but Anna suspected for the privacy such a stop would provide. He turned to face her directly, his scarred features serious, but warm with an emotion she had glimpsed in unguarded moments throughout their partnership. "Anna, these past weeks working with you have been the most meaningful of my medical career. But they've also been the most personally significant since before the war changed everything about how I understood myself and my place in the world." He paused, seeming to gather courage for what he wanted to say. "I believe I've fallen in love with you, not just as a medical partner, but as a woman whose strength and compassion have restored something in me I thought was lost forever." Anna felt tears prick her eyes at the honesty in his admission. The walls she had built around her heart during years of isolation and fear had been crumbling for weeks, worn away by Thomas's steady support and the intimacy of their shared work. But hearing him speak so openly about his feelings gave her the courage to acknowledge her own emotions. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both frightening and liberating. "I think I began falling in love with you that first day when you risked your reputation to protect my right to practice. But it was working beside you, seeing your dedication to healing and your willingness to accept what you couldn't fully understand. That made me realize how much I needed you in my life." Thomas reached for her hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned through years of medical practice and frontier living. "Then we'll build our future together, both professionally and personally. A partnership that can heal not just individual patients, but entire communities." Anna felt the familiar warmth of her gift respond to the touch of his hands, but this time the energy was different, not healing power flowing outward, but something more complex flowing between them. Recognition, acceptance, and the promise of a shared future that neither would have to face alone. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, intertwining her fingers with his. "Something I've never shared with anyone else about my gift." Thomas waited patiently, his expression encouraging her to continue. "When I touch someone who's dying, I can feel their life force, sense how much time they have left. But when I touch you, I feel something completely different. I feel potential, possibility, as if our lives together could create something neither of us could achieve separately." Thomas lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then let's discover what that something might be. Starting with the Henderson boy, and continuing with whatever challenges the future brings." Anna leaned forward, and Thomas met her halfway in a kiss that tasted of promise and new beginnings. When they separated, She felt changed in ways that had nothing to do with her healing gift and everything to do with the recognition that she had found not just a professional partner, but a true companion for whatever lay ahead. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their moment, and they turned to see a rider galloping toward them from the direction of the Henderson ranch. The man's urgency was evident in his posture, and Anna felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety about arriving too late to help. "Doc Hayes," the rider called out as he drew near. "Thank God I found you. The boy's taken a turn for the worse, and we've got 3 more family members showing symptoms." Mrs. Henderson's beside herself with worry. Thomas immediately began turning the wagon around, his manner shifting back to professional focus. "How long ago did the symptoms appear in the others?" "Just this morning," the rider replied, wheeling his horse to escort them back to the ranch. "Started with the hired hand, then spread to Mr. Henderson's brother and his wife. They're all burning with fever and covered in rash." Anna felt her healing energy beginning to stir in response to the urgency of the situation. 4 patients, all in various stages of disease progression, would require careful management of her abilities to ensure she could help all of them without exhausting herself completely. "We'll need to prioritize based on severity," she said, her mind already organizing treatment strategies. "The child first if his condition is most critical, then assess the others for order of intervention." Thomas nodded, his own medical training automatically coordinating with her specialized abilities. "I'll handle initial diagnosis and stabilization, while you prepare for intensive healing work. We'll need to work efficiently to treat all 4 before nightfall." As they raced toward the Henderson ranch, Anna felt the weight of responsibility settling over her like familiar armor. But now that weight was shared, supported by a partnership that had proven stronger than either conventional medicine or supernatural ability alone. Whatever challenges awaited them at the ranch, and whatever obstacles the future might bring, she would face them with Thomas beside her. The Henderson ranch appeared ahead of them, its buildings clustered around a central courtyard where several figures moved with the urgency of people confronting crisis. Anna could see the telltale signs of a family under siege by disease quarantine sheets hanging from windows, the acrid smell of carbolic acid carried on the wind, and the subdued manner of people who had learned to fear each cough and fever. "Remember what we discussed about conservation of energy," Thomas said quietly as they pulled into the courtyard. "Multiple patients means we need to pace your gift to ensure you can help all of them." Anna nodded, drawing on the techniques they had developed over weeks of collaborative practice. She had learned to sense the extent of each patient's need before beginning treatment, allowing her to allocate her healing energy more efficiently across multiple cases. It was a skill that had taken time to develop, but one that had proven essential as their practice expanded beyond single emergency cases. Mrs. Henderson met them at the door, her face streaked with tears and her hands trembling with exhaustion. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Jimmy's barely conscious, and the others are getting worse by the hour. I don't know what we'll do if we lose them." Anna placed a comforting hand on the woman's shoulder, feeling some of her own strength flow into the distraught mother. "We're here now, and we're going to do everything we can to help them all. Dr. Hayes and I have treated dozens of similar cases, and we've had excellent success rates." As they entered the ranch house and began their assessment of the 4 patients, Anna felt the familiar surge of purpose that had become the driving force of her new life. This was her calling, her gift's true purpose, and she was no longer facing it alone. With Thomas beside her and their partnership strengthened by both professional collaboration and personal commitment, she was ready to fight whatever battles lay ahead. The afternoon sun streamed through the ranch house windows as they began their work, illuminating not just the patients who needed their help, but the future Anna and Thomas would build together. A future where healing transcended the boundaries between conventional and extraordinary, where love supported both personal happiness and professional purpose, and where 2 people who had found each other in the midst of crisis could create something greater than either had imagined possible. 6 months later, Anna stood in the doorway of their expanded clinic, watching the morning sun paint Cedar Falls in shades of gold and promise. The town had transformed beyond recognition from the plague-stricken settlement she had first encountered. Children played in streets where silence had once reigned. Shopkeepers called out their wares with voices full of life, and the general hum of a thriving community filled the air with music she had never expected to hear again. The wedding band on her finger caught the light as she adjusted the clinic sign, which now read Dr. Thomas Hayes and Mrs. Anna Hayes, medical partners. The ceremony had been simple, conducted by the traveling minister who visited Cedar Falls monthly, but the entire town had turned out to celebrate the union of the two people who had brought them back from the brink of destruction. Thomas emerged from the back room carrying medical supplies for their morning rounds, his scarred face brightening when he saw her. The haunted quality that had marked his features during their first meeting had completely vanished, replaced by the contentment of a man who had found both professional fulfillment and personal happiness. "The Territorial Medical Board's final report arrived this morning," he said, holding up an official envelope. "They're recommending our methods for adoption throughout the Western Territories. 3 medical schools have requested permission to send students to study our techniques." Anna felt a flutter of pride mixed with apprehension. Recognition from the medical establishment represented everything she had once dreamed of, but it also brought responsibilities and scrutiny that sometimes felt overwhelming. Her gift had evolved considerably over the months of intensive practice, growing stronger and more precise with each patient she treated. "How many students are we talking about?" she asked, taking the letter from his hands. Thomas smiled, understanding her concern. "Only 2 or 3 at a time. We'll maintain control over our practice while sharing knowledge that could help other communities facing similar challenges." A soft knock at the clinic door interrupted their conversation. Anna opened it to find Lucy, the little girl who had been among her first patients, now healthy and vibrant with roses in her cheeks and mischief in her eyes. "Miss Anna," Lucy said, using the name she had refused to change despite Anna's marriage. "Mama sent me to tell you that our new baby brother is coming, and she's asking for you special." Anna's heart swelled with affection for the child whose recovery had first demonstrated the true power of her gift. "Tell your mama we'll be right there," she said, already reaching for her medical bag. The walk to Lucy's home took them through the heart of Cedar Falls, past the rebuilt general store where Robert Caldwell had once planned to make Anna his wife, past the boarding house where Mrs. Wells continued to provide haven for travelers and newcomers, past the small church where they had exchanged vows surrounded by people who had become family. Lucy's mother, Sarah, was a woman Anna had treated during the early days of the outbreak, and the birth of her 3rd child represented a kind of completion that filled Anna with deep satisfaction. Here was life triumphing over the disease that had once threatened to destroy everything, hope manifesting in the most fundamental way possible. The delivery was smooth, with Anna's gift providing gentle support during the natural process, while Thomas monitored both mother and child with conventional medical care. When the baby's strong cry filled the small room, Anna felt the familiar warmth of her healing energy respond to new life with a joy that never grew old. "She's perfect," Sarah whispered, cradling her daughter with tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Thank you both for everything you've done for our family." Anna touched the infant's tiny hand, feeling the bright spark of life force that promised years of health and happiness ahead. This was what her gift was truly meant for, not just healing sickness, but supporting life in all its forms, helping families stay together and communities thrive. Walking back to the clinic in the afternoon sunshine, Anna reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Cedar Falls expecting to become a shop owner's wife, to live a quiet life hiding her true nature. Instead, she had discovered her calling, found love with a man who cherished her gift rather than fearing it, and built a practice that served an entire region. Do you ever miss Boston? Thomas asked, as if reading her thoughts. Anna considered the question, thinking of the life she had left behind in pursuit of a future that had turned out so differently from what she had imagined. Sometimes I miss the certainty of anonymity, she said finally, but I wouldn't trade what we've built here for anything. This is where I was meant to be. Thomas stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious but warm. Anna, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. The territorial governor is planning to establish a medical college in Denver, and he's offered me the position of founding dean. It would mean leaving Cedar Falls, but it would also mean reaching more people, training more doctors in methods that could save thousands of lives. Anna felt her breath catch. The opportunity Thomas described represented recognition at the highest levels of territorial authority, a chance to influence medical education throughout the western frontier. But it also meant leaving the community that had become home, abandoning the patients who depended on their care. What do you think we should do? She asked, trusting his judgment while knowing the decision would affect them both. Thomas took her hands in his, the gesture that had become their signal for serious conversation. I think we should accept. Cedar Falls is thriving now, and other doctors can provide conventional care. But there are communities throughout the territory that need what we can offer together. As dean, I could ensure that medical students learn to recognize and work with healing abilities like yours. Anna felt the rightness of his proposal settle into her bones. Their work in Cedar Falls had always been about more than just treating individual patients. It had been about proving that conventional medicine and extraordinary abilities could work together to achieve what neither could accomplish alone. Then we'll go to Denver, she said, her voice steady with conviction. We'll train the next generation of doctors to heal with both science and compassion, to recognize gifts that don't fit traditional categories. Thomas smiled and kissed her gently, a promise of the future they would build together. As they resumed walking toward their clinic, Anna felt the familiar warmth of her gift responding to the love and purpose that filled her life. She was no longer a woman hiding her abilities in fear, but a healer ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun was setting over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that seemed to bless the town and its people. Anna knew that tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, and new opportunities to use her gift in service of healing. But tonight, she was content to walk beside the man she loved, knowing that their partnership had transformed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone they touched. Their story was far from over. In Denver, they would face new obstacles and opportunities, training students who would carry their methods to communities across the growing territories. But the foundation they had built in Cedar Falls would remain, a testament to the power of love, acceptance, and the courage to embrace gifts that transcended conventional understanding. Anna looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought her to this moment and eager for the adventures that lay ahead. Her gift had found its true purpose, her heart had found its home, and her life had found its meaning in the simple act of healing whoever needed her touch. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.